in Ukraine drags into another year, its human toll is extending far beyond Europe's borders. Across Africa, economic vulnerability, unemployment, and misinformation are converging to pull young men into a distant conflict they barely understand, often through deceptive recruitment networks promising fast pay and safe military training. Botswana's investigation into the alleged recruitment of two teenagers highlights a wider and troubling trend, especially in Africa. Africa's youth are increasingly becoming collateral in a war not of their making. As we dive into the details, this and more will be explored into this flash news. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Tabitha Arko. Let's begin. Australian police said on Tuesday that two alleged gunmen who attacked a Hanukkah celebration at Sydney's Bondi Bridge, killing 15 people, appeared to have been inspired by Islamic State and had traveled to the Philippines shortly before the assault. We see that on Sunday's attack, which authorities are investigating as an act of terrorism targeting the Jewish community, was Australia's worst mass shooting in nearly 30 years. Now we see that the death toll rose to 16 after one of the alleged attackers, Sajid Akram, 50, was shot dead by police. His 24-year-old son, an alleged accomplice, identified by local media as Naveed Akram, remains in critical condition in hospital after also being shot. Police said both men traveled to the Philippines last month, and the purpose of the trip is under investigation. Philippine immigration officials confirmed that the pair arrived in Manila on November 1, traveled onward to Davao, and departed on November 28, weeks before the Bondi shooting. Officials also said the father traveled on an Indian passport, while the son used an Australian passport. We see that Islamic State-linked networks have previously operated in parts of the southern Philippines, although authorities say these groups have been reduced to small, weakened cells in recent years following military operations, including after the 2017 Marawi siege. Meanwhile, Australian Federal Police Commissioner Chrissy Barrett said early findings suggested the attack was ideologically motivated and inspired by Islamic State, stressing that it did not reflect any religion. Police said a vehicle registered to the younger suspect contained improvised explosive device and two homemade flags associated with Islamic State, which is designated a terrorist organization by Australia and many other countries. Investigators said the attackers opened fire on hundreds of people over roughly 10 minutes at one of Australia's most popular tourist destinations, prompting widespread panic before police intervened. Now, we see that videos circulating online show the younger suspects preaching Islam outside suburban Sydney train stations in recent months. Authorities said they were still piecing together his path to radicalization. Still on this situation, about 25 survivors remain in hospitals across Sydney, officials said. This horrific attack has drawn sharp condemnation from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the rise of anti-Semitism. Let's take a look.
On August 17th, about 4 months ago, I sent Prime Minister Albanese of Australia a letter in which I gave him warning that the Australian government's policy was promoting and encouraging anti-Semitism in Australia. I wrote, "Your call for a Palestinian state pours full fuel on the anti-Semitic fire. It rewards Hamas terrorism. It emboldens those who menace Australian Jews and encourages the Jew hatred now stalking your streets. Anti-Semitism is a cancer. It spreads when leaders stay silent. It retreats when leaders act. I call upon you to replace weakness with action, appeasement with resolve. Instead, Prime Minister, you replaced weakness with weakness and appeasement with more appeasement. Your government did nothing to stop the spread of anti-Semitism in Australia. You did nothing to curb the cancer cells that were growing inside your country. You took no action. You let the disease spread. And the result is the horrific attacks on Jews we saw today.
Israeli Ambassador Amir Maiman visited Bondi on Tuesday, laying flowers at a growing memorial near the Bondi Pavilion and urging the government to strengthen protections for Jewish communities. Also, President Donald Trump, the United States President, continues to encourage the Jews to observe the Hanukkah celebration. Let's take a look.
Likewise, in Australia, as you know, that was a terrible attack, 11 dead, 29 badly wounded. And that was an anti-Semitic attack, obviously. And I just want to pay my respects to everybody. And in Australia, you probably read it's been a very, very brave person actually who went and attacked frontally one of the shooters and saved a lot of lives. So very brave person who's right now in the hospital, pretty seriously wounded.
Meanwhile, Australia has seen a rise in anti-Semitic incidents over the past 16 months, prompting the head of the country's domestic intelligence agency to describe anti-Semitism as his top threat to life. Bondi Beach reopened on Tuesday but remained largely quiet under overcast skies as mourners gathered near the site of the attack. Among those paying tribute was Olivia Robertson, 25, who said the attack had shaken her sense of safety in a country where her family had long viewed as a refuge. Ahmed Al-Ahmed, our hero, a 43-year-old Muslim father of two who tackled one of the gunmen and seized his rifle, remains hospitalized with gunshot wounds. He has been widely praised for his actions, including from the United States President Donald Trump. A GoFundMe campaign in his support has raised more than $3.4 million. Let's take a look. Right there on your screen, the brave hero, a 43-year-old father, a Muslim father, who stood his ground to bring down this heinous crime by these people, having to open fire on Jewish communities celebrating Hanukkah. That is a horrific incident. But right there, his brother, he has been hospitalized, and his brother has a statement to make as regarding that. Let's take a listen.
Still, he's in the hospital, and we don't know exactly what's going inside. But they said the doctor, he's very okay. And next 2 hours, they let us to go in and see Ahmed, because he's still inside and he do the operation. But we hope he will be fine. He's a hero, 100%. He's a hero, because what we see on the social media, he's 100% hero.
To his shoulder?
Yeah, he have 2 shots, one in his arm here and one in his hand.
Meanwhile, the federal government said Australia's gun laws would be reviewed after police confirmed that Sajid Akram was a licensed gun owner with 6 registered firearms. Police clarified on Tuesday that Akram received his license in 2023, correcting earlier information that dated it to 2015. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke said firearm regulations introduced after the 1996 Port Arthur massacre required re-examination. That would see that former Prime Minister John Howard, who oversaw those reforms, warned against allowing the gun law debate to distract from efforts to combat anti-Semitism, also accusing Prime Minister Anthony Albanese of failing to do enough to address the issue. Albanese has a response to this. Let's take a look.
What we saw yesterday was an act of pure evil, an act of terror, an act of anti-Semitism.
an attack on the first day of Hanukkah targeted at the Jewish community. A dark day in Australia's history on what should have been a day of light. We are stronger than the cowards who did this. And I want to conclude finally by saying that the government is prepared to take whatever action is necessary. Included in that is the need for tougher gun laws. This afternoon at 4 o'clock, I will put on the agenda of the National Cabinet tougher gun laws, including limits on the number of guns that can be used or licensed by individuals.
The victims range from a rabbi who was a father of 5 to a Holocaust survivor and a 10-year-old girl, Matilda Britzvan. According to officials and media reports, 2 police officers remain in critical but stable condition. Now, away from that and moving over to the current development with the Jeffrey Epstein files, almost 90 flights linked to Jeffrey Epstein arrived at or departed from UK airports over nearly 3 decades, some carrying British women who say they were abused by the convicted sex offender. A BBC News investigation has found. The BBC identified 3 British women who appear in Epstein's flight records and related documents and who say they were trafficked. Lawyers representing hundreds of victims say the findings raise serious questions about why there has never been a full UK investigation into Epstein's activities. One of the women later testified in the United States against Epstein's longtime associate, hoping to secure her 2021 conviction for child sex trafficking. Despite that testimony, the woman has never been contacted by UK police, according to her lawyer. The woman, identified in court as Kate to protect her identity, appears in records for more than 10 Epstein-funded flights in and out of the UK between 1999 and 2006. As this report unfolds, the woman has not been fully identified. Now, the investigation examined thousands of publicly available documents from court cases and Epstein's estate ahead of a U.S. deadline under the Jeffrey Epstein Transparency Act to release government files. Those records include incomplete flight logs and manifests showing 87 Epstein-linked flights arriving or departing UK airports between the early 1990s and 2018, dozens more than previously known. The documents show unidentified women listed as passengers on some UK-bound and UK-departing flights recorded only as females. 15 UK flights occurring after Epstein's 2008 conviction in the US for soliciting sex from a minor. Extensive use of private jets, mainly to and from Luton Airport, alongside commercial and chartered flights via Heathrow, Gatwick, and Stansted. Now, more than 50 of the recorded journeys involved Epstein's private aircraft, which during much of the period were not required to submit passenger details to UK authorities in the same way as commercial flights. The Home Office said private aviation was not subject to the same centralized record keeping at the time. The rules were tightened in April last year. 2 months ago, the BBC shared publicly available information about the UK flights with this report and later sent detailed questions about whether it would investigate potential British victims trafficked through the UK. The Met did not answer those questions and said on Saturday it had not received new evidence to support reopening its investigation, that it would assess any relevant information released in the US. Meanwhile, US-based lawyers representing victims say some clients allege abuse on British soil, and others say they were recruited in the UK and trafficked to the United States. The records also show Epstein continued to travel to the UK after serving a US prison sentence and completing house arrest in 2010. Despite rules at a time that could have allowed immigration officers to refuse entry to foreign nationals with sentences of 12 months or more. Immigration experts say US citizens did not require visas for short stays, leaving decisions to border officials' discretion. Meanwhile, Epstein died in a New York jail in 2019 before standing trial on federal sex trafficking charges. Legal experts say a UK inquiry could still examine whether people based in Britain enabled his crimes. Now, that's the current developments coming right there on the Epstein files. And moving over to Africa, in Botswana, the Botswana government has opened an investigation into the alleged recruitment of 2 young men to fight in Ukraine amid growing reports that Africans are being drawn into the conflict by misleading offers of military training and quick pay. Authorities in Gaborone said the men, aged 19 and 20, believed they were enrolling in short-term military training in Russia, but were instead funneled toward the Russia-Ukraine war. The Ministry of International Relations said it is working with diplomat and law enforcement agencies to establish the circumstances of their recruitment and secure their return. Meanwhile, the ministry urged young people to exercise caution over overseas military offers, warning against unverified international recruitment schemes and advising prospective applicants to consult embassies or consulates before accepting such offers. This has also called on African government to issue clear public warnings to prevent similar cases. Now, the Botswana case mirrors incidents reported elsewhere on the continent, underscoring the risks facing young Africans amid the protracted conflict. Now, we see that in July, a Nigerian national, Kehinde Olawabemileke, who had joined the Russian army, was captured during fighting in Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region by the anti-Kremlin. Ukrainian officials said he had studied in Moscow and was recruited with promises of quick payment and low-risk service before being deployed to the front line with little preparation. Earlier, a Senegalese national, Malik Diop, was captured on the Torix front in Ukraine's Donetsk region under similar circumstances. I mean, there's a recurring pattern in Africa. Now, the cases point to a growing pattern of young Africans being recruited to fight on both sides of the war, Russia and Ukraine, often through misinformation and false assurances. The Freedom for Russia Legion has repeatedly called on foreign fighters to surrender or defect, accusing Moscow of disregarding the safety of its troops. Now, until next time, this is where we'll be drawing the curtain on today's Flash News. Remember, we'll bring you untold stories on Undaunted at the top of the hour, 8 p.m. Until then, do have a pleasant day and stay safe.